Welcome to ICC. I'm Grandmaster Pia Cramling and I am back with a recap from the FIDE Grand Prix, the first leg. And today we are going to see what happened in the semifinals. We have two winners. Congratulations to Levon Aronian, congratulations to Hikaru Nakamura. They won their semifinals and they are going to play against each other in the final for this first Grand Prix tournament. Aronian played against Lenier Dominguez with white. He managed to win the game. It was a very sharp game. We're going to look at it very soon here. And the second day, Dominguez tried to get something, but Aronian again, he was very convincing with the opening play. He was playing quickly again, and only after 2 hours of play they had reached a rook endgame, 3 pawns against 3. There was absolutely nothing Dominguez could do, and they agreed to draw. And the scenario in the other semi-final was very similar. Nakamura with white, he was pressing, he got a very long endgame, he finally won against Richard Rapport. And the next day, when Richard Rapport had to win to get to the tie breaks, he played a very unbalanced position, but it was more like that his opponent with Black was getting the upper hand, and after a little more than 3 hours of play, he decided to give up his attempt to win the game. So we are going to look at the games. We will start with the first game between Aronian and Dominguez, and I was just wondering if it was important, the fact that we saw the winners. Aronian won, Nakamura won, and they didn't have to play tiebreak. Could it be that they kept the energy, so while their opponents were playing a very tiring tiebreak and had to win the tiebreak to qualify, they could rest, they could also make some decisions about what they wanted to play the next day. Here is the first game, Aronian white, Dominguez black. Queen's Gambit accepted, not a surprise, as is one of Dominguez's pet lines. The most ambitious way for white to play. In here black has lots of way of choosing different moves, and the most normal is to attack the center, not to try to keep the pawn. But Dominguez choose something which is a bit unusual. And I was surprised when I saw this move. It's nothing wrong with the move, nothing wrong with the idea, but it's very sharp, and in different lines black has to give material for to have some compensation. And I just thought that this is not the way a solid player like Dominguez would like to play. I just thought that he would prefer to play a more solid opening and just try to keep the balance. Because in a mini match, that's really what you want to do. You want to keep the balance with black, you really want to have a draw with black, and with white is when you want to try to put pressure on the opponent. This is the Dominguez way of handling this opening. Black could have gone a6 instead, but this is also a very interesting way of playing. And exactly this position Dominguez had with black against Wesley So in the group stage, and Wesley So went for a more solid continuation. He played b3, and after some later on the game was a draw. But Aronian, who of course had seen this game, who could prepare for it, he went for the sharpest possibility white has here. Very direct play. White wants to make a fork on c7, and actually there is no way for black to stop it. But black of course has a plan against white's aggressive play. Yes, giving a pawn. And now the bishop has to be pushed back. And this is a very important move. You have to put the bishop there, you have to wait with playing knight c7, And if there will be some checks on b4 later on, when the white knight has gone away, you always have bishop d2. Black could not stop the fork, but is developing his pieces. And now, of course, black wants to have as much as possible for the exchange. And now he has a little bit to think, what would you like to play here for white? And actually, there's only one way. White needs to defend the bishop, and he has to defend it with the knight. To play queen e2 would just be very bad. After queen takes f4, the black queen wants to come back to b8 to pick up the knight in the corner, and if a white tries to save it, this will just win the game immediately. So knight e2 was played. This was also played very quickly to close the diagonal for the black king, looking at g2, so white can go out with his bishop. And here black was thinking some time, and actually black has taken his time to get to this position, even though he was the one who chose to play this line. And that's why I thought that Aronian made a very good choice of opening. And after the game he said that one reason why he chose this opening was that his opponent had to play the tie breaks. He probably was going to be tired after tie breaks, and this position is very difficult to play, maybe for both players, but it's difficult to handle, and it seemed like Aronian was better prepared for how he wanted to put the pieces here. And here black has this annoying check, and he can play knight 7 to f6, or he can do what he wants. And the problem with the next move is he's winning a tempo, but he's weak in his king side, he's weak in the center, and now the knight on d7, or the other knight also, of course not, will never be able to get to f6. And this is something which is black is not happy with. Aronian was still playing his move very, very quickly. He knew he wanted to put the pieces like this, and here black now plays a very natural move, but I would like to play the maneuver he makes just directly, and in a sharp position like this, a very crazy position, unusual position. Every move, every tempo can be so vital. And here I just like this idea, changing the diagonal, but doing it one tempo earlier than happened in the game. If white continues as the game, we can see what happened. Now black is just going to take the pawn on d4, and white king doesn't have time to hide away in the corner on h1. So probably white has to defend the pawn on d4, and after queen f4, some planning some knight e3, maybe planning rook e8 with activity. Black is, in my opinion, having enough compensation. Instead black played rook e8 first, bishop e2, bishop c7, rook e1, all very natural move. White wants to put the king in safety, and maybe here black shouldn't be so quickly with his next move, but this was his plan. But I actually like to play maybe a6, just to defend b5, and also to open this long diagonal for the queen, king g1, and now after queen e7. So it's the queen which is looking at d4, and if white, for example, just go and change the bishop, we can maybe later on, we can perhaps even play knight e5, knight c6, put the king away, and rook d8. Perhaps this would have been a better way for black to play than what happened in the game. But this was so natural, and I was almost shocked by white's next move. it's a very natural move, it's a very good move, but again, Aronian played this move so quickly. He just played King G1. And of course, this is logical. King safety is the most important in a game. And he just wants black to take the pawn on D4 because the queen on D1 is looking at the black king on D8. And black so much would have liked to have castle, to have his king safe on the king side. But he's standing there in the middle of the position, in the middle, in the center. And therefore, now Dominguez, he just changed his idea and he didn't want to grab the pawn. And I will just show a little bit what could have happened if he took the pawn. Here he can choose maybe by bishop f2, but with the king in the center, white can even give back material and he could play like this, take on e1 and taking on d5, and the position is opened. The king on d8 is just not well placed, and even here white is pawn down, but white has just a fantastic position. And if black instead go after the b pawn to be greedy, take as much material, white could continue like this. Wanted to take on c3, wanted to take on b5, and now putting the next rook just looking at against black king, and this is just winning for white. You want to take on b5, you can go knight d4, you can take on c3, and I cannot see how a black king can escape. So instead of taking the pawn, Dominguez play knight d5, and this is a very positional approach. You're putting more pressure on the d4 pawn, but again there is a problem, and there is not enough harmony among the black pieces, something white is going to take advantage of. Away with the king, and now there is a way for white to open up the position, and this is exactly what he wants for his bishop pair, for his rooks, and against the black king standing there in the middle of the game. Be free. And the tactics just work for white. Black has nothing better to do than to keep his c-pawn. He made the best he could do. And now he got the pawn back, but it's not so nice to have the two knights just on the same line as the queen and the king behind there, but it was just what he really had to try to do. And here he have to make a move with his c-pawn. That's the only way to keep it still on the board. If he would have taken back, yes, white just take the pawn, and there's a check, and white is completely winning. So the c-pawn is still there, and here white has different moves. He can go knight d2 to change the knight on d4, he can go rook c1, and he can also play what he did. The position is just very good for white. But this is a good move by black. The queen is coming back to the center, is threatening the rook, looking at the rook there, so white has to do something with the rook, and of course it's not possible to play rook e1, and black will just get a new queen. So instead, rook c1, then another fine move, f5, you are defending the king side, and you're also taking away the e4 square for the queen, or for perhaps the knight. Queen c4, very logical. The queen is coming to a more active place, and maybe here now the best black could do, he made a blunder which actually loses the game directly, but he could perhaps try this. But after knight e4, the knight e3, and the idea is that the knight is defended on e3, it is still good for white, probably. But if white goes like this, maybe here black would just hang on with queen e7, because you have some tactics that's working for black, but instead I think that, sorry, 93, that queen c8 check, this would just be so much more difficult for black to handle, and here this is just a very, very difficult position for black now. But instead he played 93, and the king has to go either way, but the king position will be just very delicate, and whatever he does, he's just in very big problems. He chose to go up with the king, and can you now see the move white play to overload one of black's pieces? And it's just the move that decides the game here now. He played f4, very nice. The queen cannot take it. There is a queen e8 check, which would just decide the game immediately. So black has to go back. But changing his queen is exactly what white has been aiming for when he can win the c-pawn. And now it's just winning. But we can see Aronian are making some nice moves, some technical moves, just to avoid any kind of compensations for his opponent. Giving space for the king, defending the pawn. And now we nice last move. Whatever black play, it will be a good exchange for good exchange of pieces for white, and white has a exchange more in the end game, and it's just very easy winning. So very nice play of Aronian. I think also that Dominguez, he played well, but he got into difficulties quite early. It looked like he was back in the game, but it was maybe not enough. And I just thought that maybe the choice of opening was perhaps too dangerous in a mini match and when you want to be very solid. The next day, it was like Aronian could guess the opening of his opponent. They were playing Yuko, piano, and he just played very, very quickly, and he could keep the game level all the time, and there was no way that Lenier Dominguez could get an advantage, to get a chance to try to win the game. So let's go to the other semi-final. We will see the game, also the first game in their semi-final, when Nakamura was white against Rapport. We have the Queen's Gambit exchange variation, the Reshevsky variation, and the Queen is looking at h7 and is avoiding that black gets a chance to develop his bishop on c8. This is a very popular line now. Black is exchanging the bishop pair, maybe his stronger bishop, but like this he gets more space for his pieces. It's very logical. You don't want to have some knight f4 coming. The king is getting away from the e line. You don't mind castling alongside. There is no weaknesses on the queen side, and the pieces, the queen and the bishop, are looking at one black's king side. And now this little move, you have two ideas with it. It's actually to play g4 to hit back the knight on h5. Maybe if white is thinking of, I will show you a little bit later, if white is thinking of castling short side, then you will start a storm here. So after knight g7, this is what happened in the game. Black is planning bishop f5 and would be very happy if he could play this move. And this is something white doesn't want to allow, and so he goes g4. And here black has to choose where is he going to put the king, and the king on the king side, no, it doesn't look very safe. White plays rook d, g1, and now he's ready to push his pawns. He's ready for attacking with his pawns, and there is a hook here on g6, so it will be very easy for white to open the h5, and on the other side black will not have it at all easy to try to open white's in front of white's king. He can open the c line, but then if the c6 pawn is changed for d4 pawn, white will get a very nice outpost for his knight here on d4. So no, black wants to castle alongside too. And here we have a position. It was actually played before with, I think it was Garry Kasparov white and Vasily Smyslov was black. But here Nakamura, yes, he played some other moves. In that game, knight f4 was played. And black has one piece which is a little bit out of the game. It's a little bit not so well placed, so he's just bringing it into the center. And now Nakamura starts a very exciting plan. He has put one of his knights on the king side, but now he starts playing on the queen side. And the idea is, with this pawn attack, is to march all the way to a6 to scout weaknesses in front of the black king. And white's king with the pawn on b2 is very safe there. So black has to defend against it, and this is a very natural way what he plays. And here black could take it this way, but it looks a little bit not so convincing to play like this. The knight is still on a5. White could play maybe b4 here, maybe knight d4, and he will probably get the pawn back. And what is happening with his knight, which is standing on the rim, so it's much more natural to choose what Rapport did. He played queen b4, and knight a3 check is coming. White has no other choice than to play what he did, and I'm so convinced of that this was Nakamura's plan. He has given up a pawn, he has held the knights, getting them active or on the queen side, but now he's going to play on the other side. Knight g5, that is taking e6, knight f7 is coming, so black has to defend against it. He can play different moves, and there's nothing wrong with this move, but now comes a shocking move, and I am so convinced that this is the plan White had all the way when he played this, and I'm just very impressed by White's play. Bishop takes g6, so nice. White is getting his pawn back, and the idea is that if black takes back, he didn't do that in the game, he will take on e6, and if black takes here, this was actually bad for black. And we can see that white has a rook and a pawn against the two knights, but there are two pawns together, there are two rooks behind them. These pawns are very powerful and they will decide the game. So black cannot go into this. But after here, black could actually play this move. And for example, after knight c5, we have an endgame, we have equal pawns. White has given his a pawn against black's h pawn. But I think it's a little bit to White's advantage that his king is standing on the queen side, where black has pawn majority. So his king can defend if these pawns start marching. But on the other side, White has this extra pawn, and there black has to defend with his pieces. But maybe this is about the level position, and I guess this would have been the most solid way for black to play. Instead, black played this shocking move, knight b3, and it was just so surprising. But here we have two very creative players looking for unusual ideas, and now white can go rook c2, white can go rook c3, and I will just show you what happened if he goes if he just plays something without thinking too much. Of course, this player would never do anything like that, but there is also some dangers for white. So actually black would be winning, because now we don't care about the rook, we're going to play for mate, and there's nothing white can do to stop the mate. But after knight b3, white find a very exciting idea, because there's so many things to calculate. If you move the rook to c2, you move the rook to c3, so white just chose a very interesting idea. Threatening the rook, but now the bishop is under attack. So white gave exchange for a pawn, but again we have this unbalanced position. White has two pawns on the king side, black has a pawn majority on the other side, but this pawn will not be dangerous for a long time to go. And it's just very, very exciting, this position. I think Rapoport has chosen the very best now here. He has to force the knight back, but now he makes the decision which probably is a mistake, and that's why he gets into big problems. And I think he just have to kick back the knight here, he has to move his rook, and after some maybe small low, he has to come with his knight to the king side and try to defend against the pieces there, against the pass pawns there. And I believe that this is a position that is unclear, and that all three results could have been possible here. But this looks like a mistake. The rook goes away from the g-line, which means that the g-pawn can march further, and his idea was to give this exchange, but there is a problem here. White has an h-pawn, and the problem is that the black king is standing on the wrong side. The king needed to be on the king side. The knight is a very short range piece. It takes time before it can jump over to the king side to help the rook. And now, what is white going to do here? Rook stands perfect behind the pawn. The bishop is quite active. We need to put another piece in action, of course. The king. The king is hitting, moving to help the pawn, going to g5 and help the pawn to just be pushed further. Black was just right in time, but just for a very short time. Now he's already kicked away. So we reached this position, and it's just very, very difficult. And it was bad luck for Rapoport, because after he took this decision, giving the exchange, this was just forced, and he had nothing he could do against it. But all white's pieces are active, and we can see that black's pieces are very, very passive. With a5, he's trying to do something with his pawn majority on the queen side, trying to see if this can be of help to give him enough counterplay. And this is a very important move. It's a very nice move. White also had to be a little careful and a little bit think of, why didn't Nakamura play rook f6 to take on e6? Why didn't he choose this directly? Of course, black has this very tactical move, and now black is very happy here. So rook f4 was played, and now the plan is to go f3, and then after rook f6, rook take e6, the rook is entering, and white would just win very quickly. And that's why Rapoport here, he decides to play an active move. He decides to change the pieces, because I will just quickly show, if he goes for trying to queen his pawns, the rook is just so strong, it's just so quick. And yeah, we can further, and there's even time to take the pawn, the rook will give you check, you can play for mate, or you can just go and pick up the a3 pawn. White is winning. So here he decided to try the only active idea he had. So the rook is entering the game. White has to defend his pawn, and now here he could try this, but it's just no hopes if white just is careful. So here, yes, this little move e4 would take away any kind of counterplay for black. The idea is rook c5, take on c6. The pass pawns will never be dangerous, but if white is careful, is careless and play rook c5, black has this game changer, and here it would actually be black who would queen his pawn first and win the game. So, but Rapport, he chose the most active way, trying to get two pass pawns and hoping that they will give enough counterplay. White needs to put his rook behind the pawns so they are not marching too quickly. And here we see the problems, that the rook on a8 is so strong. The only way for black to get his pawns moving, he has to spend the tempo to put the rook defending the a pawn. Now the idea is to go d5, and then black played this very clever move. He played it immediately, and again Rapport is very resourceful. He's really fighting in this very, very difficult endgame. And here we can see the idea, if white is not careful, is white grabbing the pawn, black will get counterplay. Pawn has marched quite far down, and here he gets the chance to transfer his rook to where it belongs to, behind his pawn, and also here he easier can stop white's pawn. And white has nothing more than to give the pawn, and in this endgame I believe that black has good drawing chances. So So instead he didn't take the pawn. He played. Oops, sorry, I have to go back. So after rook e6, king h7, he played e5. They repeated once, and they played e5, and b4 was coming. e6, b3, and now one very, very nice move. In endgames, you should always play with the king. And actually, this is the difference between why white is winning and black is losing the game. White is having a pawn up, but more important is that he's playing with more pieces. He's playing with his rook, he's playing with his king, he's marching down with his pawns, and black has only active pawns, the pass pawns, and he has an active rook. But his king is just a spectator. He cannot be active, taking part in the game, and that is what's deciding this game. Also, with going up with the king, there will not be any check behind the king, which could be bothering white. So this is just a very good move. And black has nothing to do. If you go b2, there will be rook b6, a3, and now e7, and black can't even stop the pawn. So he had to spend move on rook a1, and black, he stopping the pawns, and again the rook is stopping both a4 and b3. So this rook is tremendous. It's stopping black's pawn, and at the same time it will help his own pawns further on, and it will keep away the black king. And here he could have won the rook. I will just show you this line, but here the pawns are more important than the rook, because black is playing without the king. He can go f5, he can also play like this, because this is still winning. We have a d4 pawn which will decide the game. So we had rook e4, White could play f5, but there's nothing wrong with what he played. Hoping for a check on e1. White is careful. And here it looked like it's time to resign. But once again, Rapport find a way to keep the game going. He playing c5. White could go d5, but there's nothing wrong to play what Nakamura did. He took the pawn. Only thing is, he should not be too eager to queen. Here, black will push his pawns, and the rook cannot alone stop the pawns, so black would be winning here. Check. And this was his idea of giving the pawn. The rook is threatening to take on e7. The king is coming closer. We give it check. And again, we're going to take the e7 pawn. But the problem is that white has got very powerful c pawn. And the only thing he needs to do is to take away at least one of the black's pawn. And it's what he's doing with his move. Black decided to play b2. It wouldn't be any difference if he let white take the a-pawn. And here black decided to resign. There's nothing he can do. His a-pawn is not going to go anywhere. And after a move like this, white played king b1 and the c-pawn will just march down without the black rook being able to stop it. So a very nice game, very fantastic game, I must say. There were some very exciting idea Nakamura had, and I just felt that Rapport played very well. Also, both of them played very well, but maybe in some critical moments Rapport didn't choose the best way. And after that, Nakamura got a fantastic position. Black was just really tied and couldn't do anything. But even in that difficult position, Rapport managed to find some resources to keep the game going, to make life difficult for his opponent. And as I said, the day after, when Rapport was white, he didn't manage to create so much. The game was a draw, and so we will see a very exciting final in this first Grand Prix tournament. It will be played on Tuesday. And it will be between two players playing for the United States. Very much looking forward to that. Thank you so very much and have a nice evening, day, whatever it is.